Pentagon chief, Lloyd Austin, spoke to his Israeli counterpart, Yoav Gallant, where Austin said, and I'm quoting him, "The importance of protecting civilians is high here during the Israeli military's operations," and focused also on the urgency of humanitarian aid delivery for civilians in Gaza. What's happening here? Some would call it double speak on the part of the United States.
Look, it's troubling because they're saying a lot of the right words, but you don't see a lot of action follow it. Even the trickle of humanitarian support that's been allowed into the Rafah Gate out of Egypt is not a fraction of what's actually needed to take care of just the minimum requirements of food and water for the for all those millions of people that are living in there. So that needs to get taken care of a little bit better. And you hear the United States say those words and all those officials you just mentioned, but then at the same time you hear the Israeli officials basically saying that, hey, if you're in the way, you're going to get killed. One of the senior Israeli officials earlier tonight actually said something very similar to that, where he said, we are coming in there, and if you're in a Hamas area, if you're in a tunnel, you're going to get killed, and basically get out of the way or die. So that doesn't sound a lot like they're really worried about civilian casualties. And listen, this is more than just a moral issue. That by itself is enough. But this is also a very practical issue that if Israel goes in really heavy-handed on the ground here, in addition to what's already happened in the air, and large numbers of Palestinian civilians, innocent civilians, get killed in the crossfire, they're going to have a hard time maintaining support even in the West. And of course, we know the Arab, so-called Arab street throughout the Middle East region is going to continue to get more and more angry, driving their governments potentially to take a more hostile view towards Israel. So it's in their effort, in their favor, to actually start acting on some of these things to take care of the Palestinian people.
Some critics say United Nations General Assembly vote is sending a warning to Washington. Now, a former UN Special Rapporteur said that resolution, despite being non-binding, is a fairly accurate barometer of international diplomatic opinion and also international public opinion on the war in Gaza. Basically telling Israel, we cannot keep you immune from world opinion forever. Could that be the reason why the U.S. is releasing varied statements?
And I can only guess as to what's happening behind the scenes, what President Biden thinks, what he's talking about with his Secretary of State and the other diplomatic people. But look, I think that they would be wise to pay attention to these things. Again, even if you're only worried about your self-interest, the large number of people who are voting in this direction here, many of them are America's allies and friends around the world. I think that should be a signal that might need to get our attention, that this is not just, all the people who don't like the United States are voting in a different way. This is even our friends and allies are voting in this direction, because that's kind of underscores what I said a second ago about that Israel needs the West, especially, behind them firmly. And it's already starting to erode because, there's now starting to be not just the food and water, but because of the sanitary conditions, now diseases are starting to crop up there. And again, if people are starting to die in large numbers by all different means, Israel can lose the support of the West. And that is crucial for their war aims if they really want to bring peace to their people.
Colonel Daniel, finally, there is a new worry, and that is Israel's borders. What are the prospects of neighboring countries like Lebanon, Yemen, and now Syria disrupting or even joining the war between Israel and Hamas?
There's a bigger concern of that than was the case even 24 hours ago when you had a number of American troops in Iraq and in Syria that were attacked by a lot of these Iran-based groups in both of those countries. And then you had the United States respond to that by firing at some Iran-backed targets in Syria, and then claiming that more would come if those attacks don't stop. And of course, you may have seen that barely hours later, another attack did come against the U.S. forces in Iraq. And fortunately, that was intercepted before it got there, and it didn't cause any harm or damage. But you can only imagine that those attacks are going to continue on. And if one of them succeeds and it actually kills an American troop, there will be enormous pressure on President Biden from many quarters of the United States to take harsh action, not just against the Kataib Hezbollahs, but also against Iran. And that is where you have a real chance for sparking this into a much larger war. And I just couldn't caution the U.S. any stronger that we need to be very, very careful before we take any action that could spawn this into a larger war. And that's even aside from what Hezbollah could do coming into Lebanon directly against Israel. there are many avenues that this could go wrong.
All right, I've been talking to military expert and senior fellow for defense priorities. He's also the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Retired Colonel Daniel L. Davis, thank you very much for all your inputs and for talking to us today.